How do you like this music behind us right now?
Well, I like music of almost any kind, including this.
The principles I have are the principles I've had from the beginning of my political life. But have I learned? Have I found that some things I thought would be effective turned out not to be effective? Absolutely. If you don't learn from experience, don't learn from your mistakes, why, you ought to be fired.
I like being able to fire people who provide services to me.
Well, Mitt Romney has to start understanding why people don't like him. It's not because he's rich, it's how he got rich. Now, here are some other rich guys. Here's Henry Ford with his Model T, Walt Disney with an early cartoon idea, Jobs and Wozniak with their first desktop. Now here's Mitt and his partners in Bane, starring in Snow White and the Seven Fuckfaces. You see what the first three have that Mitt doesn't? A product. Something they made besides money. You know, venture capitalists are not creators. They're businessmen who find weak companies and prey on them. And Mitt can't understand why anyone would ever question capitalism, no matter how feral it gets.
Governor Romney, I'm sure you've got a reply there.
You're absolutely right. You heard what I said about my tax plan. The top 5% will continue to pay 60% as they do today. I'm not looking to cut taxes for wealthy people.
Listen to my words. All right? Listen to my words.
Well, they'd be the current rates less 20%. So the top rate, for instance, would go from 35 to 28.
Oh, it would. So that would be a giant reduction in rates for the very, very rich. Now, would it be offset by the deductions?
Listen to my words. All right? Listen to my words.
My 5-point plan does it. Energy independence for North America in 5 years, opening up more trade, particularly in Latin America, cracking down on China when they cheat, getting us to a balanced budget, fixing our training programs for our workers, and finally championing small business. I want to help small businesses grow and thrive. I know how to make that happen. I spent my life in the private sector.
By a 17-point margin, Americans believe Romney should release more than 2 years of tax returns. Even 53% of independents think Romney should release more tax returns. A plurality of Americans believe these additional returns include damaging information, including 15% who say they think the revelations would show he is unfit to be president.
And we've given all people need to know and understand about our financial situation and about how we live our life.
We've given all you people need to know. What about we the people?
The people in Boston believe what is in the documents will hurt more than the barrage of attacks he's getting for not releasing the documents. So they've made that political calculation. They're sticking to it.
When every time he says, well, if I release them, you're just going to pick through them and find things to attack me with. Well, clearly that means you believe that there are things in there that are problematic, that you perhaps believe that it is problematic how you can explain to the American people how you can be a quote unquote job creator when you created much of your wealth by keeping that money offshore in these accounts in Bermuda and the Cayman Islands and perhaps, various tax loopholes, which ironically, the other thing about this whole idea, this attack on President Obama that, somehow Mitt Romney thinks he got there all by himself is so disingenuous because guess what? He had a lot of help and those were called tax breaks and tax loopholes that he had no problem exploiting when it came to accumulating his own wealth.
No doubt about that.
Now, Governor Romney has a different philosophy. He was on 60 Minutes just 2 weeks ago. And he was asked, is it fair for somebody like you making $20 million a year to pay a lower tax rate than a nurse or a bus driver, somebody making $50,000 a year? And he said, yes, I think that's fair. Not only that, he said, I think that's what grows the economy. Well, I fundamentally disagree with that.
And the success or failure of his campaign will depend on his ability to convince someone making 26 grand a year that he, Mitt, a rich guy, knows how to make them rich too. And if you elect him, he'll tell you the secret. It's not a political platform so much as a wealth seminar. This is the same thing that makes guys like Tony Robbins rich. They have a secret. But the secret turns out to be that they're rich because they're robbing you. And somehow Americans are good with this. People who like Mitt Romney like him for the same reason other people like rappers who endlessly rub it in that their life is so much better than ours.
How you like this music behind us right now, huh?
Well, I like music of almost any kind, including this.
Listen to my words. All right? Listen to my words.
Now, how about deductions? Because I'm going to bring rates down across the board for everybody, but I'm going to limit deductions and exemptions and credits, particularly for people at the high end.
Sleep, I have these sleep tapes that condition my mind to believe that I could succeed even when I'm sleeping, or to build energy in my body. And anybody who wants to succeed has got to know it doesn't just happen. You can buy a product, but you also, with that product, have got to condition yourself. You got to make it a must, and you got to get a ritual. And if you do it, whatever you used to dream about you thought was so huge, you'll just live it. You'll live it like you lived this yesterday, like we're all living the life that we envisioned. Because we had to, and because we played this game with our head. We got the belief to be real by seeing it enough times and feel it enough times till our brain believed it, and then it made it happen.
Because I am not going to have people at the high end pay less than they're paying now. The top 5% of taxpayers will continue to pay 60% of the income tax the nation collects. So that'll stay the same. Middle income people are going to get a tax break. And so in terms of bringing down deductions, one way of doing that would be to say everybody gets, I'll pick a number, $25,000 of deductions and credits. And you can decide which ones to use. Your home mortgage interest deduction, charity, child tax credit, and so forth. You can use those as part of filling that bucket, if you will, of deductions. Why am I lowering taxes on the middle class? Because under the last 4 years, they've been buried. And I want to help people in the middle class. And I will not, under any circumstances, reduce the share that's being paid by the highest income taxpayers. And I will not, under any circumstances, increase taxes on the middle class.
In fact, that's a bunch of malarkey.
I think there's a real metaphor here, because when you look at the Ryan budget, the misfired photo op sort of points you right to the Ryan budget. And the Ryan budget, according to the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, 62% of the cuts are in programs for low-income people. Now, faith-based organizations are fantastic. They do great work. But the people who run them will tell you they cannot pick up all of the slack that there would be if the government had cuts of that kind.
I like being able to fire people who provide services to me.
I think what grows the economy is when you get that tax credit that we put in place for your kids going to college. I think that grows the economy.
We've always encouraged young people, take a shot, go for it. Take a risk, get the education, borrow money if you have to from your parents.
I think what grows the economy is when we make sure small businesses are getting a tax credit for hiring veterans who fought for our country. That grows our economy. So we just have a different theory. And when Governor Romney stands here after a year of campaigning, when during a Republican primary he stood on stage and said, I'm going to give tax cuts. He didn't say tax rate cuts, he said tax cuts to everybody, including the top 1%. You should believe him, because that's been his history. And that's exactly the kind of top-down economics that is not going to work if we want a strong middle class and an economy that's thriving for everybody. Look, the cost of lowering rates for everybody across the board, 20%, along with what he also wants to do in terms of eliminating the estate tax, along what he wants to do in terms of corporate changes in the tax code, it costs about $5 trillion. Governor Romney then also wants to spend $2 trillion on additional military programs, even though the military is not asking for them. That's $7 trillion. He also wants to continue the Bush tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans. That's another $1 trillion. That's $8 trillion. Now, what he says is he's going to make sure that this doesn't add to the deficit, and he's going to cut middle-class taxes. But when he's asked, how are you going to do it? Which deductions? Which loopholes are you going to close? He can't tell you. The fact that he only has to pay 14% on his taxes when a lot of you are paying much higher, you know, he's already taken that off the board. Capital gains are going to continue to be at a low rate, so we're not going to get money that way. We haven't heard from the governor any specifics beyond Big Bird and eliminating funding for Planned Parenthood in terms of how he pays for that. Now, Governor Romney was a very successful investor. If somebody came to you, Governor, with a plan that said, here, I want to spend $7 or $8 trillion, and we're going to pay for it, but we can't tell you until maybe after the election how we're going to do it, you wouldn't have taken such a sketchy deal. And neither should you, the American people, because the math doesn't add up. It's either candy, this blows up the deficit, because keep in mind, this is just to pay for the additional spending that he's talking about. $7, $8 trillion, that's before we even get to the deficit we already have. Or alternatively, it's got to be paid for not only by closing deductions for wealthy individuals, that'll pay for about 4% reduction in tax rates. You're going to be paying for it. You'll lose some deductions. And you can't buy this sales pitch. Nobody who's looked at it that's serious actually believes it adds up.
How do you like this music behind us right now, huh? Well, I like music of almost any kind, including this.
If it shouldn't add up, if somehow when you get in there isn't enough tax revenue coming in, if somehow the numbers don't add up, would you be willing to look again at a 20%?
Well, of course they add up. I was someone who ran businesses for 25 years and balanced the budget. I ran the Olympics and balanced the budget. I ran the state of Massachusetts as a governor, to the extent any governor does, and balanced the budget all 4 years.
I'm a big believer in getting money where the money is, and the money is in Washington. And I've learned from my Olympic experience that if you have people that really understand how Washington works and have personal associations there, you can get money to help build economic development opportunities. And I want to go after every grant, every project, every department in Washington to assure that we're taking advantage of economic development opportunities.
The last, I guess, 9 months or so since the economy took its giant collapse all over the world in different areas financially, I've been meeting people that are trying to figure out what to do financially.
When we're talking about math that doesn't add up, how about $4 trillion of deficits over the last 4 years? $5 trillion. That's math that doesn't add up. We have a president talking about someone's plan in a way that's completely foreign to what my real plan is.
If we're serious about reducing the deficit, if this is genuinely a moral obligation to the next generation, then in addition to some tough spending cuts, we've also got to make sure that the wealthy do a little bit more. So what I've said is your first $250,000 worth of income, no change. And that means 98% of American families, 97% of small businesses, they will not see a tax increase. I'm ready to sign that bill right now. The only reason it's not happening is because Governor Romney's allies in Congress have held the 98% hostage because they want tax breaks for the top 2%.
Well, I think it's been clear for a while, especially since the 47% video, that the Republicans said, whoops, where did that compassionate conservatism go? We better show we have a heart somehow, because those comments are really hurting us. And so they don't want to talk about budgets. They want to put out feel-good words, and Mitt Romney offered some of those in the first debate. And they want to give us pictures that say, actually, we have really big hearts. Well, you can't make bricks without straw. Let's show us what your priorities are. Some of it, yes, should come from voluntary contributions. Sure. But we built these programs because we know none of us, we're not collectively generous enough to help the left out. And we're trying to help people get back on their feet. And so I think they're just trying to hide what their budgets would actually do.